journalism is to question the prevailing wisdom. Question the prevailing wisdom.
Just speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
All rights reserved and affirmed.
Real mine. These are weapons of mass dissent.
Are weapons of mass dissent.
Welcome to Uprising, a daily digest of independent news analysis, investigation, education, artistic expression, and activism. It's Friday, May 4th, 2012, and I'm your host, Sonali Kolhatkar.
It just makes me stop and think.
It just makes me stop and think.
It just makes me stop and think.
Silence is not an option.
The murder-suicide of J.T. Reddy in Arizona. We'll examine the implications and what lies in the fate of Rupert Murdoch and his media empire, plus actor and musician Jack Black on Charlie Hayden, his own music and film, and Rethink Reviews. This is Uprising. Good morning and welcome to Uprising. The murder-suicide that left 5 people dead in Gilbert, Arizona on Wednesday was carried out by a man infamous for espousing neo-Nazi beliefs and founding a Border Patrol militia. The shooter, Jason Todd Reddy, aka J.T. Reddy, was profiled as a nativist leader in 2008 by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which cited him as advocating for violence on the border as a way to stop unauthorized immigration. Reddy is quoted as saying, "I firmly believe in having a minefield across the border. This is 100% effective." Reddy, who reportedly stockpiled weapons, formed the vigilante militia U.S. Border Guard and appeared at neo-Nazi gatherings for the National Socialist Movement, but he also engaged in mainstream political efforts, including an unsuccessful run for the Mesa City Council in 2006. At the time of his death, he was running for Pinal County Sheriff. His extreme views were known to many within and outside of Arizona, but hidden from most was his violent nature behind closed doors. On Wednesday, before turning the gun on himself, J.T. Reddy shot and killed his girlfriend, Lisa Medeiros, her 23-year-old daughter, Amber, along with the young woman's 24-year-old fiancé, and Amber's 16-month-old baby girl. 4 generations of one family died in a horrific case of domestic violence that did not take those close to the family completely by surprise. Friends of Lisa Medeiros and her daughter say J.T. Reddy moved into the family home after losing his job, and they told the Arizona Republic that he was, quote, cruel and controlling. Medeiros had called police once before Wednesday to report that Reddy had choked her, and 2 women had filed police reports against him in the past. As many struggle to make sense of the tragedy, others are trying to distance themselves from J.T. Reddy, perhaps none more strenuously than ex-Arizona State Senate President Russell Pierce, architect of the controversial immigration law SB 1070. Before 2008, Pierce and Reddy were political allies. The ex-state senator eventually disavowed Reddy as a racist, but their former friendship is back to haunt the recalled politician. Joining me on the phone right now is Connie Phillips, Executive Director of the Sojourner Center in Arizona, a domestic violence shelter, and Stephen Lemons, a reporter with the Phoenix New Times. Welcome to Uprising, Connie and Stephen.
Thank you.
Connie, let me start with you. Let's talk about the aspects of this case that may not be getting as much media attention because of J.T. Reddy's very high-profile political views. For somebody like yourself who works in this field and sees many cases of domestic violence, some of which end as horrifically as this Wednesday's case did, how do you explain these kinds of incidents?
Well, domestic violence is about power and control. The abuser has a mentality that says, I should own you and you should let me. The abuser is looking to maintain and keep control over his partner or her partner all the time. And so this is not an aspect of his, being a terrorist or a racist. This is an aspect of him having the mentality of someone who is abusive toward others. Regardless of his political views, it's the same mentality, whether he's a banker, a doctor, a city worker, unemployed, or, someone who believes we ought to be guarding the border.
There was a study just released by this Violence Policy Center that found that in 2011 there were hundreds of Americans, 691, nearly 700 Americans who died in murder-suicides, over 300 murder-suicides during just the first half of 2011. How common are these instances? We might not have even heard of what happened with J.T. Reddy had he not already been a well-known political figure.
Exactly. These incidents happen far more often than we realize. We have a tendency to just sort of dismiss them. A woman is injured, a woman is killed, and, we just sort of see that as, well, just another day in the news. If domestic violence were a disease, we would be reacting like we did with the bird flu. It's 1 in 4 women will be impacted by domestic violence in her lifetime. It is extremely prevalent. It is very serious. It is dangerous. It leads to homicide, yet we dismiss it as if it's just a family matter or it's just something that happens.
I want to turn to Steve Lemons. You're a reporter with the Phoenix New Times, and you're very familiar with J.T. Reddy. You've been following his work in your journalism. In the wake of his death and, his death by his own hand and the murders, how do you view what happened on Wednesday?
Well, I think it was to some degree inevitable, some act of violence on Reddy's part. I don't think anyone expected the domestic violence, but I don't think anyone who knew him or followed him would be surprised by an act of violence. What was particularly disturbing about the militia group he formed, U.S. Border Guard, is they were running around the desert in an area that's highly trafficked by migrants, and they would often run across them.
Are you with us, Stephen?
Say again?
Can you repeat the last sentence? You got cut off.
Oh, I'm sorry. They often were running around the desert, looking for illegal immigrants, migrants who are going through Pinal County or parts of Pinal County. And when they came across them, they would, apprehend them illegally, I think, and then turn them over to the Border Patrol. A lot of people believe that he may have been involved in some murders in the desert. That hasn't been proved yet. But as I was saying before, I think people who followed him would have expected violence against the illegal immigrants he often encountered in the desert, rather than this kind of violence. But it doesn't surprise me that this happened, and I think it's particularly disturbing that they found 6 military-grade grenades that could be rocket-propelled grenades, 40 millimeter. So he potentially could have killed a lot more people in an act of domestic terrorism. And I think it's important to think of Reddy as a domestic terrorist, because that's essentially what he was.
Now, you said that for people who were following him, that what he ended up doing came as a surprise, that we would have been more likely to expect him to have committed violence against undocumented immigrants. But for people who were close to the family, it seems as though this didn't come as much of a surprise, given that Medeiros, his girlfriend that he killed, had already called police once, claiming that he had choked her. There had been police reports filed against him by a couple other women. Connie Phillips, how, in your work, do you feel that the reports that women file against violent males get undermined often?
Well, we all watch a lot of Law and Order on TV and think that, when someone calls the police and there's going to be an arrest and a trial and they go to jail, the reality is that domestic violence is a misdemeanor. And for the most part, it has very little consequence. So, it carries nothing, and it thrives in silence. People didn't know about the abuse or talk about the abuse. They weren't interested in how he treated his family. They were interested in how he was treating, people who were here illegally, people at the border. It wasn't a big deal about how he was being abusive to his family. Our systems
I'd like to make a
are
point
not...
about that.
Stephen, 1 second. I'll definitely get your response. Can you finish your sentence, Connie?
Our systems are not established and developed so that they can take domestic violence seriously. To do so would overwhelm our legal system, overwhelm our law enforcement system. Our states wouldn't have enough money. It's not set up, the legal system, the law enforcement system is not set up to be able to respond to domestic violence in an effective manner.
Stephen Lemons, how do you respond to that?
Well, the only thing I have, I understand the problems with domestic violence in the country at large. I think it would be a little wrong to just paint this as a domestic violence situation. Keep in mind that his girlfriend's daughter was half Hispanic, and he had made racial comments about his girlfriend's granddaughter, who was half Hispanic as well. So that is also an element of it. Also, his activities in the desert were highly publicized, and as I said, likely illegal. If the federal government had taken note of them as they should have and infiltrated his organization, perhaps arrested him. If they had raided his house, arrested him for having these grenades, which was illegal, all those people that he was connected to that he killed would still be alive.
Well, let me ask you this, Stephen, and then also Connie. It seems as though the fact that J.T. Reddy owned firearms brings the issue of gun availability and the widespread availability of firearms and the increasing legitimization of the public to own and use firearms. How do you, was J.T. Reddy a gun rights advocate, Stephen?
Oh, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had our version of Occupy Wall Street in Phoenix. It was Occupy Phoenix, and he showed up to it with a couple of his neo-Nazi buddies, and they were armed with M16s. AR-15s, actually. I'm sorry, but long guns, essentially, and he was a very intimidating guy. He liked guns. He had a lot of guns. Everyone knew this. He was, I think, perhaps even imitating or impersonating law enforcement. As far as the gun rights advocates, Arizona is unique in that situation in the sense that it's a very programmed state. So him being down the border with all these other folks and them being heavily armed with long guns would not have raised an eyebrow in Arizona, or the fact that he had munitions at his house.
Connie Phillips, let's talk about gun ownership as well. The issue of J.T. Reddy having all of these firearms probably comes as no surprise to you. How often, is it the case in states that men who are convicted or even being accused of domestic violence or have domestic assault charges, are they able to still legally own guns?
You're stretching my remembering of the actual way that the laws work. But when you get an order of protection, you can ask the judge to have the guns removed from the home, and they can. There is a way to prohibit abusers from having guns. However, guns are readily available around in our society. It's very well accepted here in Arizona and other parts of the country. So, and it's one of the things that makes it difficult because people don't think we should be taking guns away from abusers, and it's a controversial aspect. But the reality is that abusers are using any means of control, and the gun is just one more way of intimidating and using power over, saying I am more, creating that image of you need to do everything I say.
Connie Phillips, give out the website for the Sojourner Center in Arizona.
It's sojournercenter.org. And so Sojourner is spelled SOJOURNER Center.org.
I want to thank you very much, Connie, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Connie Phillips is Executive Director of the Sojourner Center in Arizona Domestic Violence Shelter. Finally, Steve Lemons, you're a reporter with Phoenix New Times. How do you see J.T. Reddy's legacy playing out after his murder-suicide? I mentioned Russell Pierce is strenuously trying to disavow himself. You've written about how Pierce has attempted in the past to distance himself from J.T. Reddy. After his death, it's going to be very interesting to see how gun rights advocates also paint him, because often the justification for owning guns is self-defense, and they may try to paint J.T. Reddy as somebody who is completely, insane and should not perhaps have had guns in the first place, but this would be after the fact.
Yeah, I don't think that the gun issue is going to have any resonance in Arizona whatsoever because it's the West and because of the program nature of the state. I'm hoping, as far as his legacy, if there is one, other than the misery he's caused, that people take seriously these hate groups and the people who are involved in them. And, for a long time, as I said, he was involved in essentially arresting people, even though he was not authorized to do so. Even if someone is here undocumented, they still have, rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. What he was doing was illegal. The federal government did not pay attention to it. He was doing it for several years. He was involved in a lot of white supremacist activity across the country. He was a very dangerous individual. He could have killed a lot more people. I think in the end he killed the people who was, it was easiest for him to get to. And but that should not let us forget that he had 6 rocket-propelled grenades in his residence.
Wow.
As well as chemical and other chemicals and munitions. He could have made a larger bomb. You're talking about a possible Timothy Migray, and the federal government turned a blind eye to it.
Well, Stephen Lemons will link to your writings on the Phoenix New Times at our website, uprisingradio.org, later today. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Stephen Lemons is a reporter with the Phoenix New Times, and we've been talking about the J.T. Reddy murder-suicide. This is Uprising. Later in the hour, we'll examine what the future of Rupert Murdoch may be, as well as his media empire. And we'll also hear this week's Rethink Reviews. After this short break, Jack Black joins us. Stay tuned.